So Wrath has officially been confirmed for later this calendar year, and if you're anything like me, you're probably starting with your prep for the expansion if you haven't begun already. And one of the most important questions is going to be what class should you main in Wrath of the Lich King? So I thought I would start this series today starting with the Warrior, looking at 5 good reasons why you should play any given class. So let's dive into it today with the Warrior, and we'll start with number 5. Just before we do, however, I do want to stress that this is not going to be taking a look at the power of any given class in any given role, neither in this video nor any other in the series. It's not too hard to find a comprehensive list of what classes are going to be incredibly strong, and if that is your only requirement, then you don't need more reasons to play or not play any given class. You've probably already made your mind up. This is looking more for reasons that are slightly more obscure or reasons that you may not have thought of outside of conventional power curves for why you might want to play a class. With all that being said, it's time to go in with number 5. So in at number 5, we're going to be talking about Titan's Grip. Now, Titan's Grip is the talent that anyone who's played retail is probably familiar with, that enables Fury Warriors to use two-handed weapons in each hand. This makes for a very classic look for the warrior, being a berserking behemoth who wants to just wildly swing with giant weapons, smashing away at everything in front of them. This is so iconic as part of warriors in Warcraft now that I think that playing before this actually has a little bit of a diet warrior feeling, because it's just not the same impactfulness, quite literally, as smacking something with 2 giant axes. Not really much in terms of practical reasons as to why this is so much better than using 2 one-handers. It does increase your DPS, but all in all, it's not going to be something that you're going to want for its practical reasons so much as the fact that you get to look cool running around with 2 giant weapons smacking everything to death. This leads nicely onto our number 4 pick, which is the amount of fun you can have playing a warrior. Now, a warrior is going to be probably most people's pick for, if not the most fun class to play in WoW during TBC and Classic. It's certainly going to be right up towards the top of the list, unless I suppose when you're leveling. But that does not change in Wrath of the Lich King. If anything, the warrior becomes infinitely more fun now that it seems a little bit more capable, it gets a few extra buttons, and of course, like we already alluded to, you will be smacking things with weapons that are twice as big. This means that the same reasons people love the warrior for all of its reasons historically, mainly due to its simplicity and barbaric nature, are only going to be amplified in Wrath. At number 3, we are going to talk about Shadowmourne. Now, Shadowmourne, for anyone who is unaware, is the legendary 2-handed axe that you can get from doing the Icecrown Citadel raid. Now, the fact that a warrior can get a legendary in an expansion is not new. In fact, they've pretty much been able to get all of the legendaries for the majority of the history of the game due to their capacity to use any weapon other than wands. However, this one is pretty much tailor-made for them. So if you do find yourself playing a Fury Warrior during Wrath of the Lich King, there is a weapon that is essentially designed for you. Now, getting your hands on this weapon isn't going to be an easy feat, certainly not if you are not the first person selected to get that weapon in your guild. However, it is going to be something that is relatively attainable comparative to a lot of legendaries previously, as there isn't as much RNG dependency as there is in other legendaries previously. Now, given the amount of other class representation that is going to want this weapon, notably Death Knights and Ret Paladins, and how many people I expect are going to be playing those classes, it could be a highly competitive item. However, the fun of being the guy who gets the legendary and gets to absolutely destroy things that he hits is never going to be something that's lost on me, and I think that is why it's deserving of its 3rd place position here. Now, in second, we're going to have something that's quite subjective in terms of both the fact that it does require some predictions moving forward from myself, but I am very confident in those predictions. However, it does also require an assumption that this is something that matters to people, and that is going to be the fact that warriors are going to be less represented than they have been in the two classic expansions previously. Both the classic vanilla experience and TBC Classic have had a relatively high amount of warriors making up the percentage of the population, and I do believe that that is going to dip with Wrath of the Lich King. First off, warriors are basically in the same position on DPS meters as they've always been. They start off a little bit weak until becoming absolute powerhouses at the end of an expansion, while other classes in Wrath are going to be pretty strong throughout. That being said, one of the bigger things as well in terms of class representation is flavour of the month, and with a new hero class coming out, and the fact that we're going to get the hero class in the form of the Death Knight in the pre-patch as opposed to having to level one up when Wrath hits, I expect there are going to be basically Death Knights running around everywhere, making up the overwhelming majority of the melee DPS population. On top of this, Paladins are also going to be in an incredibly strong position, and both Paladins and Death Knights are going to be thematically very fitting for playing Wrath of the Lich King, which is something that also matters to a lot of people. Finally, beyond that, when it comes to tanking capabilities, while warriors are very much a very capable tank in Wrath, they are arguably beaten out by both the Paladin and the Death Knight that we have already talked about, so once again I expect that to be a contributory factor to warrior populations declining in favour of these other classes. Now, how much that matters to you is obviously something very subjective, and as a result, take that with a grain of salt putting it at number 2, and if you want to comment down below that you believe it shouldn't have featured on this list whatsoever, or that I've got my order wrong, please do let me know. But for me, the fact that there's going to be less warriors around means that I'm more inclined to play it myself. It is the case that in Wrath you are going to want at least some representation from basically all forms, including warriors, in most situations, and having the capacity in order to be able to fill that role if it were required is something that I'm going to enjoy doing now that I will have less competition for filling that role. And coming in at the top spot is the fact that dual spec means the world to all classes that have 2 roles. By that, I of course don't mean the talent specs, I mean the actual roles to be fulfilled in PvE, such as tank, healer, and DPS. As a warrior, you have access to all of those apart from the healer, of course, and dual spec basically as a result means a little bit more to you. Comparative to a class that, say, has pure DPS only, they are going to get a bit of situational advantage from dual spec, or maybe they'll have a leveling spec or a PvP spec, and it's something that's going to be a nice quality of life change for them, but ultimately is not going to be that impactful. If you play a class that can do every role, you're still going to find yourself in the position where you're going to be having to pay for respecs periodically, or simply limiting yourself and not getting the freedom that is afforded to you by dual spec. Classes that have 2 roles that they can fulfill are going to be the ones that benefit the very most, at least from a PvE perspective, in terms of dual spec. I intend on having both a Fury set as well as a Prot set, and having both of those be my 2 represented specs on dual spec. As a result, I'm going to be able to have that freedom to tank a dungeon as and when I please, and immediately go back out of the dungeon, pop back into Fury, and continue with questing. This is something that really does afford an awful lot of freedom to an awful lot of classes, but I think very few will benefit to the same degree that the warrior will. This is something that I think is going to make a big change for a lot of people in terms of what they're going to pick for their class to main, and it certainly is for myself, with my 2 contenders being Shaman and Warrior, both of which are in this situation where I'm going to be able to have both roles and be able to change between them willy-nilly as and when I please. And that is something that's going to mean the absolute world to me, and I expect to a lot of you as well. But that's going to about wrap it up for me, guys. I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you think that I got them wrong or right, let me know down below, and I hope to see you in the next one. I do intend on continuing this series out for each and every class within WoW in Wrath of the Lich King, and as a result, I hope to see you in those videos as well. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Laters.